co-production of Ave Maria Radio and EWTN Radio, and carried across the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
Transmitting the treasures of our Catholic faith to your radio every day. This is the Guadalupe Radio Network. Radio for your soul.
Join us in praying a memorare for families experiencing separation. May they find the inspiration for communication and the appeasement required for forgiveness. Remember, O most gracious Virgin Mary, that never was it known that anyone who fled to thy protection, implored thy help, or sought thy intercession.
Hey, yo, Mick, from now until midnight on February 20th, the GRN is raffling off a 2024 black Mercedes-Benz GLB 250. No wonder you're losing focus out there. How do you win a beauty like that? Just go to grnonline.com or call 888-784-3476. Well, what are we waiting for? Hurry up and knock this bum out, kid.
Victory Investment Strategies is a sponsor of KATH 910 AM. They pray for continued blessings on all who make Catholic radio possible in North Texas. The unique programming is vital to our daily lives. Victory Investment Strategies is a full-service investment firm owned by Joel and Elizabeth Victory, members of St. Patrick Cathedral in Fort Worth. They offer a variety of products and will customize a plan to fit your individual needs. 866-810-6800. 866-810-6800. Securities offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA SIPC.
The word faith has a history that goes back to the Old Testament. It originates as a Hebrew word that speaks to the strengthening of hands. This strengthening is tied to a belief and trust in God. In Exodus, we see that when Moses' hands grew tired, his sons assisted in strengthening and holding them up. When Joseph and Mary went to Bethlehem for the census, it was no doubt a journey that required strength, for Mary was with child. On our own journey, when we grow tired, we have others around us in faith to assist us and to strengthen us. Friends, a priest, a nun, or with the sacrament of reconciliation. In each step comes a strengthening when we stay tied to a belief and trust in God. This is Michael Gisandi with a bit of Catholic encouragement.
Thanks for listening to KATH 910 AM, Frisco, Dallas, Fort Worth, and North Texas on the Guadalupe Radio Network. Catholic radio for your soul. Heard also at grnonline.com and on your smartphone.
This is an EWTN News Link. I'm Teresa Tomeo from Catholic Connection. Greece legalizing the redefinition of marriage. The Greek parliament approving a bill yesterday allowing same-sex couples to get civilly married and adopt children. Greece is now one of the first Orthodox Christian countries to allow so-called same-sex marriages. The church was strongly opposed to the measure, which was approved by 176 lawmakers in the 300-seat parliament. And a new study suggesting there are more overdose deaths from smoking drugs than from injecting them. The CDC looking at data from crime scene investigations, autopsy reports, and witness accounts of overdose deaths, comparing information from 2020 with information from 2022. Their report finding smoking was the most common form of drug use involved, and it found the percentage of overdose deaths from smoking drugs rising to about 23%. I'm Teresa Tomeo, and Call to Communion with Dr. David Anders starts now.
What's stopping you from becoming a Catholic?
Why can't women become priests?
What's stopping
I don't understand why I have to earn salvation.
What's stopping
Why do I need to confess my sins to a priest?
What's stopping you? This is Call to Communion with
Welcome to Back to the Father, a show about the journey of life focused on our final end, which is God Himself, our loving Father. And now, here's your host, Dave Palmer.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of Back to the Father here on the Guadalupe Radio Network. And there is some exciting news to share with you. A lot is changing here at the GRN in many good ways, and we've got a few things to report to you before we get to the meat of the program, which, of course, is the teachings of St. Thomas Aquinas. And since we are now, 3 days into Lent, I thought you might be interested in hearing about what did St. Thomas Aquinas say in the Summa Theologia about prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. And it would be a really, really long show if I told you every article that Aquinas said about those three topics, because he did write about quite a bit, especially about prayer. And so I've just selected a few select articles from the Summa, some interesting topics related to them that I think you'll find quite interesting and also edifying for your own, walk during this Lenten season. So we'll be getting to that very soon. Before that, though, let me bring in studio producer, board op, host, guest. I don't know what you are, Sissel, but
so also part-time sprinter as well.
You're doing it all. Yes, but yeah.
I always love the few minutes before we go live on this show because I'm running around
I know.
like a chicken with my head.
I know.
off.
We need to get we're going to get eventually one of those wide cameras that kind of gets all the movement.
Just so you can just see me
right?
running back and forth.
Yeah. So let's talk. First of all, we're at the very end of our car raffle season, and so if you have not bought tickets yet, you literally have today, the weekend, and Monday, because Monday. I think it's the 19th at midnight, the late midnight, not midnight at the beginning of the day. That's it. The website will be down, and no more ticket sales after that. So if you haven't bought your tickets yet, please go online, grnonline.com/raffle, and get your tickets. Or even better yet, hopefully you'll be at one of the parishes where reps from GRN, regardless of where you are, will be out. We're going to be at 9 parishes in North Texas this weekend. But yeah, get your tickets. Contact your GM if you want to sell tickets, and we really appreciate that very much. The other thing that I'm going to let Sissel kind of explain is that there are changes happening very fast about the way that we are broadcasting, especially our shows that are on social media, which is pretty much all the shows that GRN produces. This one's unique is that it's only social media. Okay, we're not on the radio. We're only on social media. But what exactly has changed and what impacts this particular show today, Sissel?
For sure. Well, we have moved up in life. We're slowly moving up in life. Let's put it that way.
It's about time.
We're using a new streaming software, which is super, super exciting and always a little bit nerve-wracking, but it's a lot of fun because I can see comments a little bit easier. But yeah, the GRN, we've hired Keith Downing as a full-time employee. I was like, what is the word I'm looking for? A full-time employee. He's the host of Morning Joy, but he's also doing a lot of the stuff on the internet and helping with streaming, along with Joe Loney, who's one of our engineers here. And we are streaming on Rumble for the first time today. I know that the morning show has often streamed on Rumble, but I think this is the first appearance that Back to the Father is. And in the future, Dave, really excited. I don't even know if you know this part. We can actually stream on Instagram too.
Oh, is that right?
On our Instagram page. So in case you didn't know, Guadalupe Radio Network has an Instagram page. And it's kind of been, I don't know if you've noticed, Dave, it's going mini viral these days.
Yeah.
Have you seen? It's gotten like, some of our reels that we've been posting have gotten
on
like,
Instagram?
On Instagram, we've gotten like 50,000
yeah,
views.
Which, are there any particular ones,
yes,
especially that you and I have maybe done that have gone viral?
I mean, some of yours on YouTube have definitely gone because you're talking a lot about philosophy, and that's apparently YouTube is where those people are.
Yeah, the brainy folks on YouTube. Yeah.
On Instagram, the ones that have gone really viral are very short and simple, but like Keith shared this awesome prayer for fasting that the Catholic Church has, and that one got like 50,000 views because everyone's like, oh my gosh, because it was very timely, right around Ash Wednesday. Everyone's like, I need this. And then they had one about the Enneagram personality test.
Yeah.
That one's gone pretty viral too because a lot of people were like, I didn't know this.
And it was just a little short, a
little snippet from an interview they did on Morning Joy.
Yeah, I heard that interview. It was very interesting.
So, and also all of the segments that we're doing for Morning Joy are being cut up and put on YouTube at grnonline.com there as on GRN Online. And you can watch just like whatever the little segment is that you want to watch.
Yeah.
So like Dave's segment, Thinking Out Loud, my segment, Fruitful Living, and all the other guests that they have, you can find them pretty easily. So make sure you're following us on all those platforms.
Yeah, there were a couple of them. One of them was from a Back to the Father show a couple weeks ago when I was talking about the philosophical roots of the French Revolution. If I say it again, maybe it'll go viral again. If I just kind of repeat the same thing again. And then there was one from Morning Joy when I was talking about something that we're going to actually be talking about in the show today. So it's already gone out there about St. Thomas Aquinas' teaching on whether under some circumstances a person is allowed to, quote, steal. Now, I know stealing is, that's the seventh commandment, thou shalt not steal. So I don't think St. Thomas Aquinas can override, God and the 10 commandments. And so you can't steal, but can you take things from somebody without their permission? And that's the question that Thomas asks, which we'll be going over today as well. So exciting times. That almost makes you, from my perspective, I'm thinking in sound bites. Something, I'm thinking, I don't want to go there.
Tweetable?
Yeah, right. Is this something that they could take the 45 seconds of and it can be put on a short? I'm not going to think that way though. That's way overthinking it. So let's just let it go and have fun and talk about these things. And if you are watching us live, please, by all means, let us know where you are and where you're watching, and also comment on the topic today because, lately we've kind of departed somewhat from talking specifically about St. Thomas Aquinas. We talked about Schopenhauer. I think we talked about Hegel one time and different things. This is Aquinas, okay? This is directly out of the Summa Theologia, and I think you're going to find many of these articles that he talked about very interesting and also applicable to your everyday life, having to do with the Trinity of prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. So are you ready to go? Have you made... I know we talked about this the other day, and I think somebody was saying it's not such a great idea to talk about what you're doing for Lent. So are you in the camp of it's between me and God, or do you?
It's mostly between me and God, but I don't mind sharing a little bit, especially if someone's struggling or feeling but you got to be really careful about the comparison aspect because you don't want someone to think, oh, I'm just doing this, or oh, you're only doing that. It's a really sketchy, kind of gray area. But I think you can talk about it as oh, that's beautiful. I'll pray for you in your endeavor to do that this year.
Yeah, I mean, naturally, let's just say you're doing a rosary a day, which is pretty darn good. And then you hear somebody in the radio talking about how they're doing 4 rosaries a day. Then all of a sudden, human nature is man, that rosary a day that I'm doing, which in and of itself is pretty good, very good. And all of a sudden, by comparison, it's man,
it's also again, we don't know the full story of what's going on with their relationship with God, what they're trying, to accomplish with doing 4 rosaries a day. I know that my very good friend was advised to not add in a rosary. She was thinking about adding in for Lent because she was barely able to maintain her daily prayer life as it was. And adding in that rosary could be detrimental to her plan for her daily prayer.
Yeah.
So,
one thing I am doing is the Bible in the Year with Father Mike.
Awesome.
Just one a day.
Yeah,
I'm not trying to do the whole thing during Lent.
I think you should try to finish it in 40 days.
I accidentally said to Paula the other day that I'm doing a Bible in a day. And now that would be...
First off, how many Bibles are you are you trying to go through here?
Yeah, well, Bible in a day, just get it all done, know? But... no, I'm really enjoying the Father Mike Schmidt's Bible in a Year, and I am doing one a day, just keeping it very paced and a few other things as well. So, all right, well, let's get right into it. And again, thank you for watching. In the weeks to come, we're also going to be having some different cameras mounted in this studio.
We're going to get updated.
And why it keeps calling Toya? Sissel, I'm thinking Sherathon, when I'm on the air with Toya so much. Sissel already said we're on different platforms. And so if you're on Rumble right now watching us, let us know.
Yeah, please say hi. I just realized I should probably have Rumble up so I can see that.
Yeah.
that might help.
And then you can kind of advance these slides as we go. So this is kind of a cool first slide that just says Lent and then fasting, praying, and almsgiving. And so the first topic, next slide, is about prayer. And again, I selected a few of the interesting questions that St. Thomas Aquinas asks about the topic of prayer. And the first one is, and I think we all know the answer to this, but how Thomas answers it is pretty interesting. He says, whether we ought to pray to God alone. And the question I would kind of pose to you is, why did God set up a system? We know as Catholics that we don't have to pray to God alone. We can pray for the intercession of the saints, the Blessed Mother. We can even ask each other to pray. But why did God allow us to have intercessors? Because it seems like if he's God, he could have set up a world where everybody just goes straight to him. Every single prayer is to God, and it would have been very efficacious, and he can handle all the prayers. He can listen to everybody at the same time. Why did he set up a system whereby he kind of gave some of the, I guess, the intercessory abilities to people, but I'd also say it's not the only thing that he does that with. He could have created a world where he just continues to populate new people, and people are like dropping out of clouds or trees, and he didn't have to allow us to cooperate in procreation, for example. There's a lot of things. He allows us to cooperate in our merit. That's a very controversial thing. A lot of Protestants think Catholics are a very works-based kind of faith, but we do believe that he allows us to cooperate in our own justification, which is kind of cool. So were you taught as a Protestant that you just go straight to God and that you don't need to have intercessors, that kind of thing?
For sure. I think a few people might, and it was always kind of like a little bit frowned upon if someone says, well, like, I know, like, my grandmother or my friend who died is, looking after me or something, like saying something like that.
Say that.
If someone did say it was considered fluffy and it wasn't something like you'd actually
kind of an awkward.
Yeah, it was like not really something you're supposed to say or
But how'd y'all get around the fact that you were all praying for each other? I mean, what's like once they die?
Because you're talking directly to God for that person. You're like saying, "Oh, dear Jesus, like please take care of Shelley and her situation." That she's got going
but they
on.
wouldn't think that. Let's say, like you said, like your mom passed on. Would they have said that she would not be aware of? Let's just say she's in heaven. Would she not be aware of what's going on earth, or would they believe that she was? I
think she would, but she has no. Not that the saints have power, but she would have nothing she would interact with. You know what I
which
mean?
is interesting because while she was here, she could.
Right.
And then she dies. She's with God. She's in heaven.
Yeah, she's like,
but now all of a sudden she's lost all her power.
Yeah, slightly more powerful position than yours.
And Thomas basically, here's his answer. And I won't read all this, but you see the highlighted parts. He says, prayers offered to a person in two ways. First, as to be fulfilled by him. Secondly, as to be ordained through him. Okay, and then he goes on and says, in the first way, we offer prayers to God alone. So if I asked Sissel to pray for me because I'm, taking a test tomorrow or something, and I thought that through the power of Sissel, that prayer would be fulfilled, well, then that's sinful, right? But if I understand...
I sure as I can't do that.
Yeah, because Sissel can't do a whole lot. But if I thought that Sissel is just acting as a mediator, as, assisting me and going and I'm going to God through Sissel, well, that's all right. And then Thomas has this quote from Revelation 8:4, where the smoke of the incense, the prayers of the saints ascended up before God. So this is where Catholics typically say, aha, there you go. There's some scriptural evidence where the prayers are coming to the saints, and then the smoke of the incense is ascending up to God. And so that's kind of a cool image of the communion of saints and them kind of assisting us in our prayers. So, all right, so the next one is why do we pray? And is it becoming to pray, he says. Okay, so is it becoming to pray?
Wouldn't it be funny if you just said no, full stop, and that was like the end of the question?
One word answer. And he does two things here. He first of all gives some of the faulty kind of historical perspective of why people have said it doesn't make any sense to pray. And then he gives his answer. Now, I told Keith this on the show the other day. And I think he had a little bit of a hard time grasping it, but then I gave an example and he said, okay, that made it a little bit easier to understand. So, all right. So do you know, I think we've talked about this in the show before. Do you know like how he explains like the efficacy of prayer and like how prayer actually works? I find it really interesting.
I know we've talked about this before,
yeah.
And my brain is struggling to remember what exactly he said.
Okay. So I'm going to read this quickly, because I think it's really important for you to know. He says, among the ancients, there was a threefold error concerning prayer. Some held that human affairs are not ruled by divine providence, whence it would follow that it is useless to pray and to worship God at all. Okay, and of these it is written, you have said, he laboreth in vain and serveth God. Okay, so that's the first thing. I think that's kind of an odd one, saying basically God, does not have providence. There's, that's more of like an agnostic or atheistic kind of argument. So obviously if there's no God who's running the world, then there'd be no point in praying to him in the first place, right? The second one, another opinion held that all things, even in human affairs, happen of necessity. Okay, this is called determinism, whether by reason of the unchangeableness of divine providence or through the compelling influence of the stars. Okay, so now you're talking about astrology, or on account of the connection of the causes. And this opinion also excluded the utility of prayer. So this would be kind of a Calvinistic predetermination, predestination. Everything is all kind of worked out. There was a famous philosopher by the name of Baruch Spinoza who believed this. He believed that everything was one substance, everything was already planned, everything was determined. We just kind of go with the flow. We're not going to change anything. It's just you just accept it, and you're just kind of riding that wave. Okay, there's no free will, and everything just kind of happens. Okay, that'd be a very deterministic kind of perspective. But Thomas says no, that's not the way it works. Okay, the third opinion, and I think this is perhaps the most interesting one, of those who held that human affairs are indeed ruled by divine providence, and that they do not happen of necessity, yet they deemed the disposition of divine providence to be changeable, and that it is changed by prayers and other things pertaining to the worship of God. So this is saying that, God says, okay, I pray, Cecil prays to marry the perfect man, okay? And God had one thing in mind, and then after she prayed, he said, oh, gosh, now that she's prayed, I was going to have her marry this loser over here. And now that she prayed, I'm actually going to have her marry this prince, okay? So God actually, because of your prayer,
I would not say no.
He changed his mind, right? You were going to marry a loser. But then you prayed, and God said, oh, okay.
I guess you cannot have a non-loser.
So the question here is, how do we reconcile the efficacy of prayer and God not changing his mind?
Oh, it's about the God's will thing, right? Is that what we're talking about? How you...
I love how that kind of puttered out there.
I was expecting immediate affirmation here, Dave, and you didn't give it to me.
Well,
are you talking about it's kind of like how can we quote unquote change God's will?
Yeah,
which we don't.
But how does that matter? I mean, how does that work then, right?
I can understand why now Keith might have been confused, because this is difficult. I try to, by the way, because I
haven't even got to the part where Keith got confused.
Okay, well, we've talked about this before, I know, and I tried to explain it to my young adult group, and as I went along, I was like, I'm just going to maybe try to find the video where Dave explained it, because I don't think I'm doing a good job here.
So the example, I'm going to do it in reverse order, because first with Keith, I read Aquinas, and then I gave the example, okay? So I'm going to do it in reverse order now. So I go into my class at the Highlands that I teach on Wednesday, and we're going to have a quiz, right? And I say to myself, I could either give them the quiz or not give them the quiz, right? And so to myself, I say, well, when I walk into class on Wednesday, if any of the students say, Mr. Palmer, can we please not have a quiz today? I'm not going to give them the quiz. But if nobody asks me to not have the quiz, I'm going to give them the quiz, okay? So you see how I've set up a system where I can't lose, because if they ask, it's my will to not give them the quiz. And if they don't ask, I give them the quiz. So it's what they do, even though it'll be a different result from their perspective, it doesn't change me. Okay, does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so now keep that in mind, and here's Thomas's explanation, okay? In order to throw light on this question, we must consider that divine providence disposes not only what effects shall take place, but also from what causes and in what order these effects shall proceed. Now, among other causes, human acts are the causes of certain effects. Okay. Mr. Palmer, can we please not have a quiz today? Okay. Wherefore, it must be that men do certain actions, not that thereby they may change the divine disposition, but that by those actions they may achieve certain effects according to the order of the divine disposition. And the same is to be said of natural causes. And so it is with regard to prayer. For we pray not that we may change the divine disposition, but that we may impetrate that which God has disposed to be fulfilled by our prayers. In other words, that by asking, men may deserve to receive what Almighty God from eternity has disposed to give. Okay? Does that make sense?
100%. Yeah.
Does it really, or are you just saying that?
I think, I mostly
in light of my example,
with your example, it makes sense. Yeah. If I was just had that on my own, I'd be like, no.
So God, think about this. I mean, this is how amazing God is. He's got billions of people living in this world, right? And everybody has, their own life, and they're going through the pattern of their daily activities and things, And he's got to organize this whole thing and the interaction between people. Like, for example, the one I said about you not marrying the loser but the prince. Well, that involves other people as well. So that's their life, because now this guy isn't going to marry you and this guy is because you prayed. But this guy, is he praying or is this guy praying? So it's really amazing that God has this all kind of worked out. I don't know. I keep thinking of that. What's that game? Spot It?
Yeah, Spot It? Is that the one where you have the little circle?
And regardless of which two you put down, there's only two are going to match.
Yes.
And it blows me away. Like, how does that work?
Oh, I know. That's
I can't even explain it. But I'm sorry. I'm comparing God to Spot It.
So it's interesting because obviously this is one way to look at how God's will and the purpose of prayer. But I've also heard, and I think a lot of saints have said something along the lines of that prayer is also to change you, and sometimes it changes your will as well, what you think is your will, to align more with God's.
Yeah.
So
hey, we got a comment on YouTube.
Are you looking at Joe's comment?
No, Paula Palmer. Don't you see her there?
Oh, I see her now. Hello.
Ignoring my wife? Now, come on now. Okay,
I was just there 2 seconds ago and it wasn't there, okay?
All right, so I'll read it. Could it be that God's primary desire is intimate union with his creatures? Therefore, the need to pray on behalf of creatures guarantees participation with his divine life. Okay, there is no intimacy without the conversation of prayer.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the other. I was going to say, kind of like I was saying, I think this is very Aquinas way of saying why we pray. He's doing it in a very practical thing, but also there's very much the relationship, kind of like Paula saying that's, part of the desire. And also, who said it? What saint said that, you got to work everything you're relying only on yourself and pray all matters on
that everything's dependent on you. So and Paul and I had this wonderful conversation last night about divine will, and I was going very Thomistic with it, and she was going in a very simple way, and so that definitely is a different way of approaching these things. His primary desire is intimate union with his creatures. Therefore, the need to pray on behalf of his creatures guarantees participation with his divine life. Now, I understand that, but we're talking here about efficacy of prayer. Like when you pray and you, quote, get what you want, right? And if you're praying for a particular petition, like I said, Sissel praying for the perfect husband or something like that, how does God answer that prayer? And does he change? He can't change his mind. So what difference did that prayer make when you say that to God? Did that mean you no longer, he has you marrying guy A, now you're meeting guy B? Mm-hmm. And so,
but also again, like I said, it could also be that your desires are changed. Like I think I want to marry guy A, but then God shows me, actually, you on the surface, it seems like this is what you truly desire. But I know the deepest desires of your heart. Guy B is actually the one.
And is that more in line with what Paul is saying about union with the people?
I think so, because the closer we are to God, the more we'll know our own selves better, because we're obviously a child of God. That's our first and foremost. And when we're out in the world, we tend to let that get buried. And we have all this idea of like the world says you got to marry someone who's making, 6 figures a year already and is like looks a certain way, has certain things, you know what I mean? And we let that get into us when it's like, okay, he wants you to marry this person who has a beautiful heart for him. So,
yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, Paula, for those comments. And if anybody else is out there watching, we love the comments, and we're on different platforms now. And so keep them coming. It really makes for a great program. So appreciate that very much.
I'm really sad. I was trying to figure out why I wasn't seeing the comments come through, and I hit the refresh button on the stream. Because normally I have to flip between all the different broadcasts, but on this new streaming thing, I should be able to see them all. So
yeah, one day we'll get another intern who can just watch all the comments, and then because then you can free yourself to actually just be kind of talking on all that. Okay, the next one I'm going to go through very quickly because this is really, I think, easy to explain. But it says whether it was becoming for Christ to pray. I think a lot of people ask this question, like, why would Christ, being God, need to pray, right? Because he is God. Why would he pray? And so the simple answer to that would be, well, he's got two natures, right? He's got the divine nature, he's got the human nature. And Thomas says in the next slide here, prayer is the unfolding of our will to God that he may fulfill it. But because the divine and human wills are distinct in Christ, and the human will of itself is not efficacious enough to do what it wishes except by divine power. Okay, now this goes back to what I was talking about last night with Paula about divine will. We have these awesome conversations about divine will. So this has to do with Christ having two wills. He has two intellects. He has two natures and one person. Okay, so now we move on to fasting. Okay, got a little picture here of a plate with some water, some bread. Okay, that represents fasting. Okay, and so the first question is fasting an act of virtue? And so he's going to give 3 reasons why you should fast. Okay, and none of them have to do with losing weight or shedding some of those unnecessary pounds. Nothing about that. So do you want to take a wild guess? 3 reasons why a person would fast. And if you're out there watching in social media land and you'd like to take a stab at this, then go ahead and do that. But why do we fast? What's the point?
Is it to, I guess, I don't know, die a little bit to self and like deny yourself something so that you can come closer to God and not kind of rid yourself of things in your life that you don't need?
Well, let's see if that I think that's kind of implicit in some of these. But here it is. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Here it is.
I know. I lost my PowerPoint.
Yeah. Okay. It says the first one is. Did I put that in? Okay. Yeah.
Hold on.
The first one.
Oh, there it is.
Okay, is to bridle the lusts of the flesh. Okay, so we have to. It's kind of like exercising. It's like
building muscle.
Yeah. It's building a resistance to just always getting whatever you want, if I'm hungry, I eat. If I'm thirsty, I drink. If I'm tired, I sleep. By depriving yourself of food, you're bridling the lust of the flesh. Secondly, that the mind may arise more freely to the contemplation of heavenly things, because if we're constantly thinking about the desires of the flesh, then we can't really think about God. We can't think about divine things. And then also to satisfy for sins. Okay, so there's a certain satisfaction element to it as well.
Yeah, and Paul also said to tame the passions.
To
tame the passions.
Tame the passions. Okay, good. Okay, so yeah, so she got that one right. All right, well, okay, so moving on now. Let's see. I like this one. Is obedience the greatest of the virtues? Now, one thing to say about this is that in the Summa, St. Thomas Aquinas loves to order things. We've talked about this before. So the highest of the virtues, without a doubt, are the theological virtues, okay? Because the object is God, and they are, you can't earn them. They're infused, right? Okay, so charity is the greatest, and then hope and faith. Below that are the intellectual virtues. Okay, that's things like, wisdom and knowledge and counsel and understanding, okay? Prudence is an intellectual virtue. Below that, he puts justice. Below that, he puts humility. So obviously, obedience is not the greatest of the virtues. But he's going to say, and you're thinking, well, what does this have to do with fasting? He's going to say it's better than fasting, Okay, so if you could, if a child could either be obedient to their parents or fast 2 days on bread and water, Aquinas would say the obedience part is a greater act. And do you know why?
Because you're basically submitting your will to God. And
Yes.
Oh, I finally get something right.
Yeah, because when you give up food, it's the lower part of your soul. Okay, it's the sensitive desires. It's your kind of like animal instincts that we share with animals. But a will is in the higher part of the soul. That's the intellectual appetite, and so you're sacrificing your will. And so real quickly, Thomas says, among the moral virtues, the greater the thing which man contemns or is willing to give up that he may adhere to God, the greater the virtue. And then he says there's three kinds of things: external goods, goods of the body, and goods of the will. And by obedience, we sacrifice our will. All right, so keep talking about will. Will keeps coming up, and so that's why that is. All right, so finally, almsgiving. Okay, and I love what Thomas asks, and this question here that I'm going to go to first is kind of related to almsgiving, but I'll explain. This is the one that kind of went viral on the
let's go viral again.
We're going to go more viral with this one. Okay, so Thomas basically says, under some circumstances, can people take things from other people without their permission? Okay, under any circumstances, can I go into Walmart or can I go into my next door neighbor's backyard and take apples off their tree? If they've got like hamburgers cooking on the grill, can I go over there and take some? And Thomas is going to say yes, okay, under some circumstances. And it's what he says, and I have these highlighted. He has three parts here. He says, first of all, things of the world are ordained for the purpose of succoring man's needs so there's all these things in the world. There's food, and there's drink, and there's fruits and meats and animals that we eat and all that. There's all these resources. And he's saying the purpose of them is to satisfy people's needs. Okay, I think we know that. Okay, that's the purpose of chickens is to feed human beings, right? The second thing he says is that some people have a superabundance. All right, some people have more than they need. Okay, if you need, this much to feed your family and you have this much, which is the case of probably most people in America, wouldn't you say?
Yep.
It's certainly my case. Okay, we have more than what we need to just satisfy the needs of our family, to put food on the table and shelter, okay? So that's the situation. And then in the next slide, he says, okay, it is lawful for a man to succor his own need by means of another's property or by taking it either openly or secretly, and this is not theft or robbery. But he says in the line above that, in some imminent danger. Okay, so if my child is starving to death and nobody is giving me a help, I don't have a job, I'm not able to make any money, I'm handicapped or whatever, and nobody's helping us. He's saying, go take it. And because those people should have helped you in the first place. And so what I said that kind of went somewhat viral, I guess, on YouTube with the short that Keith put together was what this has to do with almsgiving is that we should be willingly giving this stuff to people who are desperate so that they don't have to be put into a situation due to their desperation where they have to come and steal from us. Because if the first thing happened, the second wouldn't be necessary. And so there should be a greater distribution of the resources. And since a lot of us, myself included, are holding on to them and not giving them willingly because we're all trying to take care of our 401k or our IRA or what have you, then he's saying they can just take it, because if they're in desperate straits. Okay, Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's I think that's kind of interesting. So, any other comments? We're kind of coming
I
to.
don't think so.
Okay, so all right. So, and if you're out there watching, and by the way, if you're watching this on a recorded basis, you can always email, and then we can talk about you the next week. backtothefather@grnonline.com. backtothefather@grnonline.com. And, okay, so let's see. This is the last one that I have. And when you think of almsgiving, it's kind of funny. I think people, when they think of Lent, the fasting comes to mind right away because that's something we just kind of do, and it just kind of has to do with ourselves. And I don't even have to tell anybody I didn't have lunch or pray is obviously very relatively simple because we pray and we pray the rosary or something like that. But almsgiving, I mean, do you actually give more alms during Lent? I mean, is that something that the average person kind of works into their Lent? I mean, I don't, but most people don't think about that, do they?
No, I think I have done like a small donation or something, nothing big. One thing I really don't like giving something up without a plan of doing something else. So like, for instance, I've given up eating out. And so my thought, I was just thinking about this last night. I was like, because I had my first event where everyone else was out eating and I was just sitting there vibing, and I was like, okay. And I thought, I should be doing something with the money I'm saving from this. So I started thinking about that, maybe adding up every time that I went somewhere that I didn't buy something,
and give it to somebody,
and give it to figure out how I could utilize it. But I don't think I think the almsgiving part of Lent is lost most often. Yeah, you hardly ever hear anybody talk about it.
It's interesting, but it might be, one of the. I mean, it's very necessary, because there's a lot of people like poverty doesn't stop during Lent, All right, so what's interesting about what Thomas does is that he says there's two kinds of needs. He says there's a physical needs and there's a spiritual needs, and I think most of the time we don't think of spiritual almsgiving as something that we should do. We think about giving to the poor and giving money or going to a soup kitchen and helping out of that. So he makes a distinction with the physical needs as being internal or external. Okay, internal is feeding the hungry, giving drink to the thirsty. Okay, this is what Matthew 25 is talking about, that great story of the judgment of the sheep and the goats, right? Clothing the naked, harboring the harborless, visiting the sick, ransoming the captive. I've always thought, I'd like to go visit older people, like in nursing homes. Oh my gosh,
it's one of my favorite things to do ever is going to nursing homes.
Remember we did that interview with those people that had like the rosaries, where you go into the nursing home and pray the rosary.
I love that so much.
And it's funny because I do that interview and then I think, I want to do that. Mm-hmm. I want to gather my family together. Whatever these people are already setting it up. You don't have to go call the nursing home. They've already got it set up, and you just go in, you pray with these people. And how much joy would come to these elderly people? Maybe some of them have dementia.
And more often than not are very forgotten by a lot of people.
Oh, yeah, but then I just don't do it. It's just like, life gets busy and I'm, doing something else. And so I think Lent is a good reminder of these corporal works of mercy to do some of these. To get them done. And, like our friend Anand Bimarasetti has this project Finding Calcutta. Yeah. He actually is a member of my parish.
Oh, that's so cool.
And my parish has hosted some of these, but I've only done it once. And it was like 2-3 years ago with my kids. But there's all these opportunities for almsgiving, and most of us are too busy. But the last thing I'll say is that Thomas also says spiritual almsgiving is good as well. And he gives these examples: prayer, which of course is one of the other things, instructing the ignorant, counseling, comforting, reproof. You can actually correct people. And that's a form of almsgiving. Pardoning the injury, pardoning somebody who hurt you. Bearing with him. Okay, I love this. He talks about the sinner being an annoyance to those who live with him. Okay, so if somebody is annoying you and you bear with them, okay, maybe somebody you live with just annoys the heck out of you, and you just bear with them. That's to Thomas, that's almsgiving. And then he says, quoting Galatians 6:2, bear ye one another's burdens. Okay, so I think that kind of expands the scope of what almsgiving is, and it's not just giving to the poor, but maybe visiting the sick, maybe visiting somebody in prison, maybe forgiving somebody's guilt because they've hurt you, and you forgive them. That's almsgiving. Instructing somebody, correcting somebody, reproving somebody, bearing somebody who's annoying. These are all examples of almsgiving. So that does it. Okay, that's it for this week. And so we'll check comments one last time before we bid you a fair adieu. But if you watch this show even on a recorded basis and you'd like to get on our email list, just email backtothefather@grnonline.com, and we'll put you on the email list. And Sissel typically sends out an email right before the show, says, here's the topic, here's what's going on, here's the link to watch the show, and we'd love to have you on that ever-growing email list. So anyways, any thoughts before we check out?
No, I'm very actually happy, though, that St. Thomas Aquinas, when he's talking about almsgiving in the spiritual sense, it was something I was thinking about just the other day, because I was anticipating next week's fruitful living. Since we're in the season of Lent, I'm trying to think a little bit further ahead than the day before on what I'm going to be discussing. But I was thinking about talking about the fruit of the Spirit, which is generosity. And in my head, I was going, oh, there's a lot of different ways we could go with that. And I thought, I wonder if that could tie into almsgiving. I get the generosity would be like giving something to someone, but I meant very much from a spiritual standpoint of giving grace to people when, like, it's really easy to not.
Yeah.
It's something for Lent. So I'm glad I have St. Thomas Aquinas to fall back on that one.
Yeah, and some people are just naturally generous. It's almost like a personality trait. I think about like our friends, the Porters.
Oh, yes.
They're just generous people. And I think we all know people like that in our lives, that some people are generous to a fault. They just want to give and give and give. And I had a friend in college who used to say people are either takers or givers. And of course, you have to have takers in order for people to have somebody to give to.
It's true.
And I got to admit, I'm probably more of a taker than a giver, which to my own fault, but I need to be more generous. So that's good. I'll look forward to that segment. Sissel is on 6:42 every Wednesday on Morning Joy, and I am on every Tuesday at 6:42 a.m. And I talk about this show and these topics, and I don't know how much mileage I can keep talking about Lent with, because this was kind of like an all-encompassing one. Everything he says.
True.
Maybe I should have split it up a little bit.
You can do like a midway point check-in on Lent. That's what I was planning on doing. I figured, because I'm going through the fruits of the Spirit, and there are so many things to talk about. And so I guess it kind of depends. I can always tie it back into Lent, whatever subject I choose. So.
All right, there you are. So anyways, thanks everybody for watching. This has been Back to the Father. We're focusing on the teachings of St. Thomas Aquinas and the Summa Theologia. And God willing, we'll be back next Friday, Back to the Father, same time, same channels. And we might even have some new cameras then, okay? So thanks for watching. God bless you.
Oh. Sure.
What the world is going on?
Thanks for joining us for Back to the Father. And don't forget, the glory of God is the human person fully alive. If you have comments about the show, email Dave Palmer at grnonline.com.